Today on Heart of the Matter.
Republicans are battling for your votes in the race for Missouri governor. We'll speak with Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, and State Senator Bill Eigel on a wide range of important issues, from taxes and crime to abortion rights and governmental gridlock. Our special coverage starts now.
From KNBC 9, Kansas City, this is Heart of the Matter.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Cody Holyoke. We've got a jam-packed show for you today, all about the Republican primary race for governor in Missouri. And it's turned into a three-way battle between Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, and State Senator Bill Eigel. We'll hear from each candidate today. We start with Mike Kehoe.
I didn't inherit a well-known political name. My father left when I was 1. When you start with nothing, you learn how to get things done.
Kehoe has an extensive career in Missouri politics. The North St. Louis native started out as a car dealer, eventually running the state's Highway and Transportation Commission. He spent 7.5 years in the state Senate, eventually becoming majority leader. Governor Parson made him lieutenant governor in 2018, and voters elected him to the job 2 years later. Kehoe's been challenged a lot lately about his positions on foreign land ownership in Missouri, and that's where we begin our conversation today. So much has been said about China by your campaign and by your opponents, specifically when it comes to foreign land ownership. You've been on both sides of this issue over the years. As state senator in 2013, you supported a push and helped override a veto to sell some land to foreign entities, but now back new restrictions. What is your position on this today?
Yeah, the 2013 vote was about saving 450 jobs in Northwest Missouri. It was not specifically about a China land issue. But relationships have changed with our country since then, and I've been very clear for the last several years that enemies of our country, and there's a list of enemies, is about 7 long. It's who you would think: China, Russia, Venezuela, etc., should not only not own farmland, but they should not own businesses in our state. So I don't want to balance this problem on the backs of Missouri's farmers. I believe across the board it should be nothing they should be able to own here.
Some of them already do, as you said. How would you retroactively change that then as governor?
Well, you've looked at other states who have tried that, and they've been challenged several different times. So the first thing you would do is you want to stop any more from going forward, and then you'd want to work with those businesses to figure out a way, if there's a way to get them out of that solution.
We talk about just the heated rhetoric in this campaign. There's been a lot of flash, a lot of back and forth, very contentious, especially on the Republican side. Where do you stand on that right now going into the election?
Well, you know, it's the tone that politics have gotten to, but I think it also demonstrates the difference between me and some of the other candidates in the race. They really want to govern by chaos and by screaming and hollering and yelling. And certainly that's one way to communicate with folks, but I'm a relationship person. I'm going to work with people to get a conservative solution to the problems Missouri faces, but we're not going to do it through chaotic measures.
We will say that PAC supporting you did put out an ad in Chinese that was an attack ad on Jay Ashcroft. What say you about that?
Unfortunately, as you know, with Missouri laws, and in their defense, the other candidates cannot tell the PACs what to do or what not to do.
Let's talk about taxes. Years ago, you've got a history in automobiles, safe to say, and highway work with the state. You supported the raising of a gas tax in Missouri, which goes toward improving and building roads. Typically, conservatives are against tax hikes. Does that help or hurt you in this campaign?
Well, let me just say a couple of things. I was the first candidate in this race to sign the No New Tax Pledge with the Norcross Institute. The other candidates soon came around, but I was the first one to do that. I've supported over $2.4 billion in tax cut, putting money back in Missourians' pockets. I think that's the most important thing we can do. And when it comes to infrastructure investment, it's not unusual for conservatives to be behind that. Governor John Ashcroft was the last one to increase the state's gas tax back in the 90s, and he did it because it was a conservative solution to a problem we knew we had. And so supporting infrastructure investment has not been unusual for infrastructure Republicans.
Mm-hmm. You and your opponent support the removal of a state income tax, which is the vast majority of where Missouri gets its general revenue. How do you make up for that shortfall, the billions and billions of dollars coming?
Well, look, what Missourians need to understand is, since I've been in the Senate in the last several years, we've taken Missouri's personal income tax from 6% down to 4.7%. The entire time, you have not seen a depletion in service. We've fully funded education, we've funded our roads, we've funded critical infrastructure needs and public safety. So there's a way to get there. We have a plan to get there. We have Senator Jim Talent as one of our advisors on this campaign, and we believe that putting money back in Missourians' pocket is the best thing we can do. It's the old Ronald Reagan theory. If I give Missourians back money, they'll spend it back into the economy, and the ripple effect will help us get where we need to go.
Understandably, though, going from 6 to 4.7, is different than going from 4.7 to nothing.
But we've done it over a structured period of time that's been responsible, and that's the same way we can go from 4.7 to 0. We can definitely get there.
We've had a big issue this year in Kansas City with the sports teams and talk of them jumping ship and maybe going over to KCK or jumping the state line into Kansas. How would you as governor work to keep the teams in Missouri?
Yeah, sure. You know, I'm not a fan of spending public tax dollars on stadiums, but I am a fan of economic development. And I say all the time, if the Kansas City Chiefs and Royals, if you took their last names off of those businesses and said it was Joe's Widget Factory, and they're a very important economic development operation in our state, they provide jobs, they provide an economic impact, and they wanted to move to some other state, everybody and their brother would be saying, how do we save that Joe's Widget Factory? We need to look at this conversation where it's a good return for investment on taxpayer dollars. You never want to get an economic development incentive out there that's a horrible return from Missourians. There's a way to use tools in the toolbox that we already have and work with the community to make sure we keep the Chiefs and Royals here in Missouri where they belong.
Do you agree with the Star Bonds proposal in Kansas? Okay, Missouri does not have that tool in their toolbox.
They don't have that tool. They've had some problems with the Star Bonds, as you know, over the past, and they have a problem that we don't have. They don't have a stadium at all. And so they're really starting from scratch, and we're starting from a little different position.
Next, we'll talk to Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft about the push to protect abortion rights and how he'd like to change taxes and education in Missouri. And State Senator Bill Eigel discusses his immigration policies critics worry could lead to racial profiling, one of many issues we tackle next.
Winner of the Kansas Association of Broadcasters Award for Best Recurring Program. You're watching Heart of the Matter on KMBC 9.
We're back with our next Republican candidate for governor, Missouri Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft. He grew up in Jeff City, born into a political family. His dad, John, was governor in the 80s and 90s, eventually becoming U.S. Attorney General. Voters elected Jay Secretary of State twice in 2016 and 2020. And like his opponents, he supports an abortion ban. He's endorsed by Missouri Right to Life. As the state's top election official, though, he's in a unique position, especially considering the petition effort to restore reproductive rights. That's where we start today. It had been reported late last year that you had implied that you would potentially leave the office of governor if the initiative petition on abortion passed. I was curious your take on that and if that still holds up.
Well, I didn't imply that, and I encourage anyone who wants to go back and look at the video. What I was speaking to was I have a problem with elected officials that take an oath of office, and then when they get into office, they say, oh, I can't do that, so it's going to cost the taxpayer more money. I believe you take that oath of office, and you have to fulfill that office. If you can't fulfill that office, then of course you'd resign, but I never intimated or said anything that I would resign under that. And of course, if the abortion initiative gets passed, I hope it does not, then I will spend my time fighting to turn back the clock and make sure that we protect all Americans, children, mothers, everyone in this state.
What would an Ashcroft push to reinstate or tweak those rules look like?
I think you would see constitutional amendments then being put before the people to protect life in this state. Look, 51 years ago, the United States Supreme Court said that it's okay to kill a child in the womb. And a lot of people said, well, that's decided. A lot of good people said, no, we're going to do what we can to protect all life in this country, and they've had success. If we're forced to start over again after November this year, I will lead that fight in Missouri.
Do you support abortion in cases of rape or incest?
Look, I believe we need to make Missouri the state where every mother knows whatever she's going through, she has a tremendous future, and that her child can have a tremendous future also.
Yes or no?
Do you believe that people that were conceived through incest are lesser people?
I'm asking you the question.
I'm asking you
Do you
believe that people that were conceived through rape are not real people?
I'm just asking because the candidates have been
Would you answer? Look,
forthcoming
I
on
believe that we need to protect life. I've been endorsed by Missouri Right to Life, and I find it repugnant that you think that someone, just because they were conceived through rape, is not an individual
That's
made
not
in
what
the
I'm
image
saying
of God. Well, I know people that were conceived through rape.
Sure.
I know people that were
Same.
conceived through incest, and they deserve the right to life just like anyone else does.
Does a mother deserve a choice in that case of rape or incest? Well, let me word it that way.
There are two individuals we're talking about.
Okay. You mentioned restrictions on abortion. You say that there would not be regulations. There are strict federal regulations and medical regulations in place. You went to court over the wording of the ballot language for this petition, and when you had written that there were that these were unregulated, unrestricted abortions.
They would be unregulated under that constitutional amendment, and the people that proposed that amendment couldn't even name one health regulation, one regulation designed to protect the health of a mother undergoing an abortion that would be legal under that constitutional amendment. I think the language that I wrote was truthful and honest. It's unfortunate that the Missouri courts decided that they would mislead the people of this state on that. I would invite every Missourian to read the actual language of the proposed constitutional amendment.
You and your opponents have talked about getting rid of the state income tax in Missouri.
Well, and I'm the only one that's actually put forth a plan to do that.
Tell us about it.
I'm glad that they've started talking about that after I started talking about that. We can do that 6 years, 8 years. Best way to look at it is the state government budget has increased by over $20 billion over the last 6 years. The individual income tax in our state, I've been saying $8.5 billion, but I think it actually brought in 8.2 after returns last year, is less than half of that. That just shows that we're wasting money, that we're taking in more money than we need. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. We need to get away from really just saying we're going to have a baseline budget that we're going to increase every several years. Instead, we ought to look at what do we really need. Let's have a zero budgeting baseline that we start with, saying they don't need any, and then you have to prove what you need. Roads, bridges, inland waterways, education, and public safety are core responsibilities of government. Our general revenue should be going to that before we're just raising taxes willy-nilly on the people. Americans and Missourians more specifically, it's hard for them. They're trying to make ends meet. They're having to not enroll their kids in sports or take them to camps or take family vacations because of the cost of gas, because of the cost of food. Why does government keep growing bigger at the expense of the people of this state?
How would this affect education in the state? And what do you think the role of government is in education statewide?
I think the best thing to do with education is to take the money that currently is going directly to schools for children and put those into what I would call a real education savings account, like a health savings account, and let parents control where that money goes. If that local public school is a good school and the right school for their child, to just go ahead and send that money on through as tuition to that school. On a homeschool, parents know their children better than the government bureaucracy ever can. They should be able to use those funds for homeschooling. They should be able to use those funds for private schooling. They should be able to say, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, they're all different. We should be able to make sure that the education provisioning that they're getting meets their children.
We're back next with Republican challenger for Missouri Governor, State Senator Bill Eigel. Stay tuned.
On day one, I'll issue an executive order to arrest and deport every illegal immigrant in Missouri.
Republican State Senator Bill Eigel has been making waves and catching criticism on TV lately with his immigration stance, even using a translator and phrases from Speedy Gonzalez in one ad. Eigel lives in Weldon Spring, Missouri. He served in the Air Force before starting a successful skylight business. Voters elected him to the state Senate in 2016, where he's now a member of the controversial Freedom Caucus. We'll get to that in a minute. Now he wants to be governor. I asked him about the rhetoric on immigration we've been seeing from him on the airwaves recently. How does this type of language and racially charged rhetoric, you could say, help unite voters at a time when parties are saying we need to turn the temperature down?
Well, I don't know why it would be racially charged rhetoric to say that we're going to enforce our immigration laws. I mean, we're a country of laws. We need to protect the sovereignty of the state, which is why I've made a commitment that on day one, we're going to begin a statewide deportation of everybody who's in the state of Missouri illegally. We're going to declare an invasion under Article 4 of the Missouri Constitution. That is what's going to give law enforcement that which they lack now, which is the authority to do anything. We're going to be able to activate the Highway Patrol, the National Guard, every sheriff in every county of the state to detain people that are suspected of being here illegally and deport them out of the state.
I think that's the part, though. How do you suspect them of being here illegally and not group in people who are here legally and just happen to not be white?
Well, we first of all, we have officers across the state every single day that go after folks that are suspected of committing a crime, and I'm confident that we have some of the best law enforcement in the nation. So they're going to do that, and I think that having talked to a lot of law enforcement, a lot of individuals around the state, we know where a lot of these folks are showing up at, because quite frankly, if you have 70,000 people, that's not a small number. So I am going to work very hard. We're going to have every law enforcement disposal at the state bent toward this effort, and we're going to get our state back.
Let's talk about another part of your one of your ads where you say that Missourians worship God, not abortion. This is one of the many things you're saying in there. I don't think anybody worships abortion, and many people in Missouri have different religious backgrounds, not just Christianity. How can you assure voters, and by extension all Missourians, that you have their best interests at heart?
Well, because I'm always going to be the one that protects their rights. I think that the proper role of government is to protect your rights, that chief amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I've always been pro-life. I've been very outspoken about how pro-life that I am. I'm the only candidate in this race for governor that voted for the heartbeat bill, which actually led to the prohibition on abortion here in the state of Missouri a couple of years ago. And I'm proud of that fact. When I'm elected as the nominee for governor, before I'm governor, I'm going to unite the Republican Party by bringing us together to push back on the abortionists who are trying to instill abortion into our Constitution in November. So this is a fight we've got to have.
If that constitutional amendment that you're talking about, the initiative petition effort to protect abortion rights, reverse the ban, passes in November, and you're elected governor, how do you reconcile that after you take office?
Well, if I'm the nominee, it's not going to pass. And you got to keep in mind that for the past 20 years, Missouri has been one of the leaders in pro-life states around the country. Every 2 years, Missourians show up to send the biggest supermajorities of pro-life legislators and statewide office holders to Jefferson City that we've seen maybe anywhere in these United States. So if we have the right person as the nominee of our party who's going to unite Republicans to fight back against that, I don't think that we're going to have a problem.
You don't want women to terminate pregnancies. What is your plan for helping families support these children once they're born, potentially, especially low-income families?
Great question. Let's get rid of personal property tax. I mean, personal property tax, we're one of only 21 states that even have personal property tax, and of the 21 states that do, we have the third highest rate of personal property tax on vehicles anywhere in the country. That means that those working and middle income class households that you're talking about are struggling $300 or $400 on December 1st just to be able to keep the car that they need to get to work every single day. So I think that in this case, more government is not the answer. Less government is the answer. We're going to have less government.
I would say a child costs more than $300 or $400 a year, as you know. So are there any other plans to try and help these families if you're saying no abortion?
If we could have every one of those working middle income class families in this room right now, I think the idea that we could alleviate and get rid of personal property tax would be so overwhelmingly positive and would be the best step forward that they've probably seen from government in a long time. That's a great place to start.
You've been a state senator for 7.5 years. You've been very outspoken member of the Conservative Caucus, now the Freedom Caucus, which had purposely held up bills at times. You once brought the Senate to a standstill for 41 hours. You've been in the middle of infighting with your party. So I guess my question is, if you're governor, how do you plan to get anything done with burned bridges potentially in the General Assembly?
No, because I'm going to do that one thing that the other two candidates haven't been doing and won't do. I'm going to call on Republicans to do Republican things. I look at the other states we're trying to emulate, states like Texas and Tennessee and Florida. It's not that those states don't have moderate Republicans in their legislatures. What those states have that we don't is a bold conservative governor that's going to call on Republicans in the state capitol to do those big red Republican things and then hold them accountable if they don't. I'm the guy for precisely all the reasons that you've made. You're right. I don't get along with these special interests down in Jefferson City. I don't work for them. I want to work for the 6 million Missourians who live in this state and need us to confront the swamp.
I want to touch on something you said about special interests. It wasn't just that, it was Republican leadership calling you a swamp creature and members of the Freedom Caucus just saying to illustrate a point that it was gumming up the works of government.
Yeah, I think that's right, because whenever they want to do non-Republican things, we bring things to a standstill. And I think the leadership that made those comments is the exact same leadership that failed to get some of the biggest priorities over the finish line at the end, initiative petition reform, some of the tax cuts that I'm proposing. So yeah, we do have a rhino problem down there, but we're going to take care of that when we have a conservative like me in charge.
We have much more with all the top candidates running for Missouri governor and other key races in both our states. Watch our full conversations online right now at KMBC.com. Just click the Heart of the Matter tab. We'll be right back. KMBC 9 political reporter Michael Mahoney's back with a quick analysis of what we just heard. What stood out to you about the candidates?
A couple of things. When with Jay Ashcroft, his aggressive tone with you, which he has started to do in a number of other interviews with reporters around the state, he was very aggressive in that, and he's been that way. His call for a elimination of the state income tax, which is 2/3 of the general fund for the state of Missouri, would prompt a wide rearrangement of state government, hauling in Missouri highway funds and other state agency funds into the general fund. We'll see how that goes. Bill Eigel called for a reckoning. He's appealing to the MAGA voters of the Missouri Republican Party, of which there are many, and it would be similar to his conduct in the state Senate when he was there. And he's also not only calling for an elimination of the state income tax, but the state personal property tax, and that's the tax that we all pay on our vehicles over throughout the state as well. Mike Kehoe explained his vote on foreign ownership as saving jobs for a pork plant, Smithville Porkville plant here, which was a different way to address that. And also Keogh is one of the only one of the three candidates that's expressing any sort of support from the state for stadiums here in Kansas City for the Royals and the Chiefs.
And our full interviews on KNBC.com. You can hear more from Ashcroft and Eigel on that. What's the state of the race right now?
It's tight, and it's going to be tight. This is going to be a barn burner. The latest polls from last week show Jay Ashcroft and Mike Keogh tied at 29%, and Bill Eigel with 18%, and undecided at 15%, which is pretty high going into the final weekend of this. This is going to be a race where it's going to be whether or not Mike Keogh can get more Main Street Republicans out rather than Jay Ashcroft and Bill Eigel, who both appealing to MAGA Republicans inside of the Republican Party of Missouri, and there are a lot of them.
Yeah, all candidates were really pushing for an individual endorsement for former President Trump. They all got one. So what's the factor here, if any?
There's no impact from it, and I think it's sort of disrespectful to the Missouri Republican Party voters in this primary to issue a meaningless endorsement like that. If you're going to do that, pick one of them. Otherwise, what's the point? It doesn't make any sense to me, and I think it's disrespectful to the voters.
Yeah, and he's done it before in Missouri.
Right.
All right, Michael Mahoney, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us this week. We'll be back with post-election analysis next Sunday on Heart of the Matter. We'll see you then. Be sure to go out and vote. Have a great day.